it will not be the artificial intelligence which will take your job very soon. It will be another developer which is using artificial intelligence which is taking your job.
So welcome to a brand new episode of our podcast, Human and AI, Minds, Machine, and the Gradient Descent.
Thanks for tuning in to our geeky podcast, where we discuss the fascinating field of AI and machine learning, corporate craziness, passion for technology, and the role of humans. We are Uli and Abri, your hosts for this episode, and today we're diving deep into a topic that's reshaping software development, generative AI, and in particular, the GitHub Copilot.
That's right. And to help us navigate this kind of conversation, we have two exceptional guests for Siemens who have been spearheading actually the rollout of a solution that may see as a game changer, actually, at least a pretty cool Gen AI use case for Siemens for sure, right? As it changes the day-to-day activities of software development, changing workflows, maybe even possibly to, streamline and take more a different approach to the software development culture.
So please join us in welcoming none other than Thomas Rettenmaier, the GitHub Copilot product owner, and Adrian Dischinger, a seasoned GitHub Enterprise DevOps engineer, both from DI IT at Siemens. And with their leadership, creative approach, and meticulous dedication, Thomas and Adrian are not just enhancing today's productivity, but are also paving the way for continuous innovation and efficiency in software development. Today's discussion promises to uncover the layers of this transformation. And throughout this episode, we're eager to dive into this journey, the strategies behind the adoption, and of course, the challenges and opportunities that you've encountered.
Thomas, Adrian, happy to have you today. So welcome to the show.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Thanks for being here.
So maybe to break the ice, it's pretty cold today in Munich as well. So maybe for those out there in the audience that don't know you yet, what are two hashtags, or should I rather say Git commits, that describe you best? Maybe Thomas, do you want to start?
Let's start with hashtag stand up again and hashtag curious.
Stand up again. Here you go.
Yeah, great input from Thomas. For myself, be innovation and communication, two driving topics I've been maintaining for a while.
Oh, super cool. So innovation, what does innovation mean for you then?
Innovation is mainly to innovate our daily workflows and processes at Siemens, to enhance our daily tasks, and basically just to reduce time to market for our developers.
Okay, and what does standing up mean?
It means that in the life of a project manager, there are many obstacles to overcome, and you have to stand up again after every problem you have faced.
All right, staying resilient in the age of AI. But let's talk about a bit of, the AI, specifically in software in an IT environment. Generative AI has taken the world by storm, right? Shop floor to top floor. Everybody's talking about copilots. Everybody's talking about how to augment their own task, right? How do you see the role of Gen AI and generative AI technology in software development and the life cycle? How do you see it currently in the software process maybe? And where do you see greater opportunities in involving the large language models, the LLM stack more increasingly?
Currently I think that software development is maybe one of the areas from Gen AI where it shows the most potential. And also seeing at the latest developments in Gen AI for coding assistants, it's very promising. There are new reasoning models out there which have similar capabilities as humans already. The electricity needs for those reasoning models is very high. So currently the costs of those models is far bigger than the humans, but there's a big potential in that area. And also it's not only the writing the code where the Gen AI can support, it's also the whole environment around it, where I think like from the infrastructure and getting bigger, leaving just the coding stack from my perspective.
So, and if you look on a bit of on the software development process, I guess you can see that there is a bit of the requirement specification aspects, I guess. Then you have to actually maybe the software boilerplating, I guess, which can be done, right? There should be then a bit of a testing regime, I guess, which should be, and maybe then a bit of the CI/CD pipeline along the line, right? Do you feel already that, each part of that step has been somehow innovated, pushed throughout using AI technology?
Yeah, definitely. From my own perspective, on experience as a developer, as a DevOps engineer, using GitHub tools mainly, we do see those enhancements. Basically, the overarching picture is the growth of the context windows. That means the inclusion of more and more context, of more and more, inputs, basically grows over time. You had the source code, as Thomas mentioned, as a start, and then we grow from there to include CI/CD tool inputs, their results, basically, and to just enhance the inputs that you give to the models. Your prompts are enhanced by those inputs. This happens mostly in the IDEs. So, for example, digital code that we use as a primary target.
There has been a lot of hype around the notion of the industrial copilot for engineering. So it's everywhere at every fair. We see it and we hear lots about it. And what it does is it leverages AI to help automation experts crank out code way faster. So Thomas and Adrian, I'm curious to hear your thoughts. So how do you stack up the industrial copilot for engineering against something like the GitHub Copilot? So what are the overlaps or the differences that you see?
Yeah, so from my own perspective, as I mentioned, I'm a DevOps engineer, so I provide tools for developers, basically, their platforms and apps. And we do see that the GitHub Copilot is a strong focus on the software development. So that means in IDEs, in those development environments. And the industrial Copilot is a different focus. It's more on the shop floor, enhancing your workflows, your products, basically, by combining insights from Siemens and also our partner Microsoft, which is the provider of the GitHub, the industrial Copilot, and also the owner of GitHub. But it's a different focus. That's for sure. Yeah.
So there's a lot of copilots in the current times, and it's speaking on typical capabilities that generative AI provides, and one can see that in a lot of cases, the translation of let's say natural language input to specific output, right? In terms of, I guess, in coding environment, saying what do you want to code, and then it produces, I don't know, Python, C++, Java, right? And we see the copilots for, industrial copilots for the SCL, for the automation code. We see the copilot for in Teams, summarizing our messages, I guess. So we see it in Power BI and other visualization and creating dashboards, right? And so what makes it really somehow unique in terms of in a software development? Why should Siemens care, using these kinds of capabilities in Python, C++ and stuff, right?
Yeah. I think because Siemens is one of the biggest software development companies out there, and for that it's crucial for us to lead the topic and implement those changes in a sensible way. So having all the rules checked and so on. But Siemens is a software development company, and I think for us it's crucial to optimize our process to deliver the best products also to our customers.
So then there is this notion, everybody's talked about GitHub, right? GitHub is the community, I think acquired by Microsoft, what hasn't been, right? So yes. With, I guess everyone maybe outside, in the listeners here, right? You probably have your own GitHub, store with private, code base in there. So on top of that lies then a certain kinds of capability, which is called GitHub Copilot, right? Can you a bit of summarize what is this?
Yeah, it's good to mention that. So both products have a very similar name. They have both the GitHub, the company name, and the product name. But GitHub Copilot as a product is, in our version, GitHub Copilot for Business, or the client-based version, is independent from the GitHub Enterprise server or GitHub.com, which is the public one used by most of our listeners probably. So it's understand that both are independent, but they interconnect very well. So as they're both from the same company, they are very linked together to, for example, let's say you would create a pull request, so a change request on your GitHub Copilot repository. This would fetch information from GitHub into your local IDE to enhance your workflow, your creation of the contents, basically. So it's connected, but it's from the maintenance for the product, it's independent, but the interaction is there, of course, yeah.
Yeah, and probably not everybody out there is a software developer. So the IDE is the tool where the code is written. And so there are many other GPT models which can probably support with software development. But the GitHub Copilot offers the possibility, as it's directly integrated in the development tool, to give a seamless experience. So in the past, the developer, for example, he was checking for a solution on Google or Stack Overflow or somewhere. And this takes time and brings you out of the loop. But now the developer can stay in his IDE. He can do the questions to the GitHub Copilot chat functionality, and at the same time has a functionality to autocomplete like the code he's writing in the moment.
So Thomas, does it mean no 20 tabs open and 7 tabs on Stack Overflow? How to write a UI? Only 91? No.
Just one point to add, one important thing to understand. Of course, you could still use, let's say, for example, chat.siemens.com, the internal chat platform at Siemens, but you would miss the filtering, basically. So we employ a filter on those results to make sure that the results are compliant with Siemens policy. So, for example, you might not be able to use open source results based on your coding product. So you would have to filter those. That's something that's very important to understand. This component is employed on the GitHub Copilot before you get the results.
So from maybe a bit of expectation, why should a company utilize generative AI in terms of either Codex or let's say the GitHub Copilot, right, for the software development? What was the main trigger point that someone said, like in Siemens, let's do that?
When I spoke to the managers, we always said we can provide you immediately with improved documentation, for example. So in the past, let's say, documentation was always the topic which, we are close to production ready and we need to fix our stuff, and we do the documentation later. Then new issues arise, and probably the documentation was never proper finished. And with GitHub Copilot, you could start supporting the creation of the documentation, also the unit tests, automated tests to check if your functionality still works after some tests have implied. So we started with functionality which raises the quality, but which raised the quality of the product and has not been done in the past. So this is an easy to calculate and additional productivity when you have not done it in the past.
Okay, so you augment the current software development by, utilizing, automatically documenting. I love documenting my code, right? Probably not, right? And everybody hates it, right? But it's automatically generating the documentation of the code. What does it actually do? What was the purpose for that? What's the role of the function, and what are the parameters maybe, right? To be set up, as well as for the unit testing. Okay, that sounds about easy. Okay, just install it, is it?
It is really plug and play, yes. So you just log in with your account, and then you use one of the general IDEs, Visual Studio or something, and then it comes as a plugin. So it's very easy to set up. There is no big setup involved except of username, password, or the Siemens ID.
But in terms of, let's say, okay, understood there is a cool capabilities. We want to augment our folks. Hopefully every code is now, developed in Siemens with some kinds of Gen AI capability, which is pretty cool, faster and more quality. But rolling out a software tool like that in a large corporation isn't that easy, is it? Right? Can you guide us a bit of on the journey, right, in rolling out the GitHub Copilot? How do you approach it? Where are some reactions? Where does some risks or with some blockers,
Yeah, I took over the topic from Ron David Stetzer. So he did one of the tasks in the beginning. But yeah, how our approach was first checking if all the different governance topics are fulfilled. If the legal side, the export control topics, the data protection, if all those things, if the solution fulfills the demands in that area. Then we did many different pilot phases. First with like random code, then internal code, and the latest then the productive code. You don't want to start with your productive code, of course. You want to make sure that everything is fine before. Then we checked the code for duplicates. So we set up one pilot phase where all the code which was created is going to checked if there are code duplications or if there are copies, or if somebody copied like code from Stack Overflow, which we just mentioned. And yeah, then we also did a scientific study together with Foundational Technologies. They did a deep investigation, and after we saw it gives us additional productivity and all the governance topics are clarified, then we set up like an environment where we could have up to 2,000 users, and like those 2,000 users have been allocated like overnight. The demand was very huge, and then we stick to those 2,000, and at one point we presented everything to the DI management, what you had, the additional productivity, and the DI management, they did then a bold move and decided to get licenses for all software developers within DI.
That's a huge achievement. Congratulations to that. And it seems like it was a pretty big endeavor that you started there to roll that out, and you started small with the pilots and not with the productive code, and doing all the data cleansing at first until you really rolled it out. And I guess once you encounter on such a journey, there must be also quite some obstacles on the way, and must be sometimes tricky, and there must be some setbacks. So maybe you want to share a little bit what hurdles did you experience along the way?
I think one of the biggest hurdles was regarding the legal clarifications. So the AI, the technology has evolved very quickly, and the legislation to that not. So there is, I mean, it's no legal advice, but so the outcome of the generative AI is there are some issues with copywriting that. And of course, as a company, you want to save your copyright. So we needed to set up a rule set to make sure we can keep that copyright. And yeah, the users were not happy with it because like the seamless work, which was promised, was not possible with that strict rule set. So like we did many iterations with the legal team to improve our rules to still make sure that we can have the copyright. We have been in discussions with politicians and from the working group of artificial intelligence, and they said they also see the need that on the copyright side there needs to be some change, even though they don't want to make very hard restrictions within AI. They see the copyright point is something where they need to work on. And yeah, we are still waiting for the adoption of the legislation. But now we have set a rule set where like the developers can work and the legal stuff is addressed.
So that means, in principle, right? So the model being used is trained on data. The data is being used from the GitHub repositories, basically on code base, right? That is contributed. Based on that, the model has learned certain kinds of vocabulary, certain kinds of grammars along the line of C, Python, and so on, whatever program language. And with that, obviously, as a corporate, we gain into a risk because obviously we don't want to run into an IP infringement, right? Copyright infringement, right?
Yes.
Is that so? How do you see the role of a provider of a solution? In this case, I guess GitHub, and why do we need to also have it on our side somehow? And what can you give it a bit of example? How do we test that things that we're not running in this IP infringements?
Yeah, let's maybe just. I mentioned those filters before that we have. Those filters are mainly on GitHub side, but additional layers are also on Siemens side to scan code, just as an additional layer before we ship to product, basically before we ship to the market. We do have those code scans. Thomas mentioned them before. Just keep in mind those scans. For now, in the current market state, they don't really run in real time. So we try to run them as often as possible, at least before we ship, of course, but as often as possible during development. And on the long term, we of course test and talk to vendors to have those tools running in real time in the IDE, so in the tooling, to just reduce the time to market by scaling those on a higher basis. But right now, the most common vendors can't provide this high scalability to do this on-prem on all the time, on demand.
Yeah. And there's like the two sides of the medal. So one is that we don't infringe the copyright of somebody else, and one is that we can really save the copyright for ourselves. So as a small explanation, when you have an AI which generates a picture, then you give there a prompt and then you get a picture, and of course you don't have the copyright to it, you just entered like a very short prompt. But then in GitHub Copilot, it can be like a very sophisticated prompt, a very long prompt. And it's interesting that in the current legislation, it doesn't make a difference because it's always the output which you want to save the copyright to. And so you need to somehow change the result so that it becomes yours. And this is like
the modification right
yes,
then?
exactly.
Right, in addition to that.
Yeah.
And I've read that GitHub also has a bit of let's say a checkbox, and like they agree or they commit to that this code is free of IP, right?
Yeah.
So that means Siemens embraces a triple check before going into productive somehow. Is that it?
It's one is the side that we don't infringe the copyright of others, and this is where that functionality which you just mentioned comes into place. But like having the result being copyrighted as yourself is something different.
All
so
right.
there GitHub cannot really help you. Yeah. But GitHub makes lots of efforts to make sure that your code has not parts of other codes included. Yeah.
Yeah, it's also good to understand. Basically, as Thomas has mentioned, the later part of the copyright that happens on the client, on the IDE by the user. So basically, by modifying those things, we then are compliant with the legal framework to say, okay, modification is done. Now you're the one who drives it, but also you have the responsibility. It's also important to note that the user has to stay in the pilot seat, in the driver's seat. To you can't just lean back and kick off the audio and do the Copilot and does the work for you. You have to stay in the driver's seat and has, of course, remain responsibility for it.
You just mentioned a very important aspect, so the user. And I wonder about, like, first of all, did you like conduct any like user research before you rolled out the tool to better understand like what is it that the users really need and how do they want to use it? And then on the other hand, as you, Adrian, just mentioned, it's also about that the user remains in the driver's seat and is responsible. So how do you facilitate that adoption? And did you feel any pushback at first, or how did that go?
So yeah, we had different ways about how the user could reach out to us in case they have a problem. Then we set up a business partner support structure. So like from every business unit or from every business, there have been a contact person. So the users went then to their business partners. They collected the information, gave the information to us. And during that scientific study, which I just mentioned, we got very deep insights. We had 6 teams which we interviewed over 8 weeks, and we made really in-depth interviews every week with every single person, and there we got most of our insights. And later on, now we have set up our champions community, so everybody can volunteer and be a champion, gets the latest information from us regarding GitHub Copilot, and we are hoping that they act as an ambassador and also spread the news and also give like small help, and if the small help is not enough, giving us the information so that we can support there.
Yeah, can you share a bit of in the early days of the test the test period, let's say, a bit of systematics, what kind of insights have been drawn. I remember it also because we were also in my organization part, as we have been also back in the days, 10,000 developers. So, I was driving and we were driving as well and trying to support, the first testing out there. And I remember, we had to commit back and say like, okay, AI generated, not AI generated, and these kinds of aspects. Can you guide the audience a bit through from, how is the setup, what are the typical focus use cases maybe were, right? And then what kind of impact criteria you were looking for, asking for, and obviously one thing, the audience is interested. What any number would be nice to hear. What's the impact then on the business side or on the people side or on the personal side, maybe, right?
Yeah, so just start from the beginning. So the whole process, the on-offboarding is highly automated, which is a big step for us as a Siemens to this rollout to be highly automated, and then have just basically a form to use the automation process that cycles back to, for example, business partners if required for further clarification.
So that means if someone is interested in testing it out, there is a workflow that can be triggered, and then it's not easy in large corporation to get a software, right?
That's the key point. You have to reduce just the overhead costs and doing rollout and offboarding, so user management. And from there on, once you're onboarded, we have, of course, surveys and forums to provide feedback and have those chances to provide insights. And based on numbers you just mentioned, during this study, we've seen about 10% increase in productivity during our study that Thomas mentioned earlier in the talk. And we still receive very positive feedback in terms of users providing us they just reduce their time in learning and research, and of course have more time for creativity. So the daily tasks, the documentation we mentioned earlier, those repetitive tasks, they are very much faster than before, and you have more time for your structure, to put yourself in the driver's seat, basically, to drive the development without having to spend too much time on the side for your jaws, basically.
Mm-hmm. So that means the task of boilerplate generation and documentation generation has been contributing to quality, I guess then, right? And to productivity by roughly 10%. That's a big rocket, is it? That's for we have a couple of thousands of software developers, right?
It's a huge leap, and also during the study, you saw like that there is a learn curve. So in the beginning, probably starting with 5%, in the end, ending up with 15%, and then you come to an average of 10%. But if you would do that study for much longer, then probably the percentage would also raise. Important is that to say to that 10% is always that the developer doesn't spend 100% of his time developing. And those 10% time saving is with development tasks.
And in those surveys, so you measured productivity. How do the developers, how did they accept that new tool? So do they feel more satisfied now that they're using it? Was there a lot of resistance at first, or did they have difficulties to really onboard on it? Did you have like particular training strategies that you employed?
I think for 80% or something, where the tool works without any restrictions, the developers are in general very happy, so that those tasks are taken from them. And for some reason, once we needed to remove some licenses, and we got immediately feedback, I need it again, how do I get it back? And this was like not good that we took them the licenses, but was good to get that feedback that it really helps to the people. And for that other 20% where the solution probably does not really work as expected, so it can be specialized languages or really huge code bases or something like this. We are collecting the feedback and also discussing it with Microsoft, where we have a very strong partnership together. And so that we can reach then closer to the 100%.
Is there a difference between if you're a very senior developer and or a very junior developer? Who gets more value out of it?
That's a good point to mention. So basically the main idea is imagine you have a junior dev sitting next to you. Let's say it's somebody who is relatively new to the organization, but has lots of background from the public. So lots of, let's say he's from university or something else, provides lots of new insights, new ideas. But the more senior experience, so let's say the driving force in the project has to be developer for now. But all the input, all the initiative is driven now from the pilot, which is very good for our senior partners as well to have those, let's say, newer ideas. You've been working on your project for the last decade or so, and now somebody comes in and says, well, why not we just look into this or this? Maybe we do a refactoring or do a new database in the background that might save them time or money. So that's new ideas, basically.
The study which we conducted came to a clear answer, and they said that it helps more to the senior developers than to the junior developers. The junior developer can probably produce much more code, but he cannot distinguish immediately if that code suggestion is correct. And so for the senior developers, they know exactly how to phrase the questions and so on. So for them, the productivity increase was bigger. What was not subject of the study was how a junior developer can also benefit from it. So if it's like learning a new language or something, then it can for sure be extremely helpful for a junior developer. But as he's working on productive code, there is some respect from the tool or something to make sure that I really understand what the code suggestion was and that it really fits to the solution I want to have. And this is just working better with a senior developer currently.
You mentioned earlier that you rolled out the tool, or you created more licenses now for 20,000 developers. So are you also planning to conduct a more representative study and maybe also incorporate aspects that you just mentioned that, I don't know, does it help me to learn a new programming language, or how can maybe GitHub Copilot also help me train so I get onboarded way quicker to that coding environment?
So what we are trying to do is if we can somehow find a correlation between the engagement of the user with GitHub Copilot. So if he uses GitHub Copilot very often, if then the output is higher, like some KPIs which we have defined. So what we are looking right now is if we could somehow get the data from those source code management systems and link it to the teams from GitHub Copilot. It's always important to not go on an individual level and have everything aligned with the workers' council and so on. We are not interested in the performance of an individual developer, but we are interested in, is there a real correlation in the outcome? Has the invest, is it really valuable? Yeah, that's one of our next steps. We are there in discussions with the workers' council and really want to make sure to make it right, to see there.
I wonder if the number of accesses to Stack Overflow has been reduced. Have you measured that?
That's an interesting question.
The funny thing is, like, many people don't know that they are not allowed to copy things from the Stack Overflow.
Yeah.
And in the very beginning, when we conducted our investigation with scanning all the code, are some duplicates there? We could find some Stack Overflow copies where we could inform then the colleague that this is not the way how it should be done.
Yeah, super cool. Then this initiative not only made our developer faster, but also our code base more, legible. All right.
I think this is really an important part. I mean, there are also different tools outside, not just GitHub Copilot. That the developer has the awareness that they should only use the tools which we have checked from the governance side, so that not our know-how is leaving the company. So if you put like somewhere in a public Gen AI tool our source code, you don't know what's happening with that. And so I think here it can help us a lot with using the official tools and make sure that our know-how stays then in the company.
Speaking of know-how, so we do have our own inner source, right, called code Siemens.com. It's like a GitLab, right? Quite nice. Kudos to the work, right? Obviously also from IT and Rettenmaier and the folks, right? Pretty cool. Actually, Roger, greets to you, to Swiss, right? You've been on the podcast anyway. We talked about that. But would it make sense then combine it? Have you thought about, how do you augment, let's say, the capability of an outside, code base, which is significant with the internals?
Yeah, it's a very central question also for the future of this topic. Thomas mentioned one future topic is, of course, the integration of the correlation data, basically, and the second topic future is those internal code bases to use them to fine-tune the models. There is also some active work on Roger's side and his team, but the important thing to understand is the scale is the issue. So fine-tuning as on a technical level is always possible, but the Siemens scale, the big scale, gigabytes of code, of text files basically, that's the main issue. So if we do it on our own, we have of course just the challenge of the costs and the resources, but we do speak with GitHub on this topic on a regular basis and see if we can use it in the future as well there.
And GitHub Copilot is very agnostic, so even with code.siemens.com or something, you can also use GitHub Copilot. But we are very eager to join our forces there and work together. I know there are many different Gen AI code assisting tools which are currently in evaluation, and I mean, it's our duty to do it for our developers, to provide them with the best tools which we have. And if that tool is then from Mistral, if it's from Microsoft or whomever, probably you need the solution which fits right to your problem. And I think it's important that we work there together.
Can you give a number indication? What is scale in terms of number of software developers in Siemens? What does it mean?
That's an important thing to understand. So we mentioned before those 20K licenses. That's just a rough ballpark number. We do have more in the meantime, but to explain that, it's one of the biggest customers of GitHub Copilot here in the EMEA region. So that's one of the main challenges of this project, to do the scaling basically. We do have a very small and team on Siemens side, just a few people that do the maintenance for this big user group that is very diverse all over the company. And so that's what I mentioned before with the models. Of course, doing it on-premise would be also possible to do it for other use cases, but then you would have to invest more in terms of manpower to do the whole maintenance and operations.
And yeah, this figure which you just asked, I think it's not 100% existing within Siemens, and one additional value which we can bring there is more transparency.
So having more transparency, how many software developers we actually work with, including offshore, onshore,
exactly,
partnering, in that.
I mean,
but it's tens of thousands at least, right? On this kind of scale internationally, right? Across region, across continents, which makes it, I guess, for export control also not the easy problem that, right?
Yeah, and then you probably have some hardware developers which work with a language which is not fully supported. So there are some obstacles in the way, and we're getting more transparency there in the future.
Every project is always an opportunity to learn more, right? So you've been now the hassle, ups and downs, forwards and backs, right? Feedback and, from working from small teams to large scale, right? What are the learnings? What would you do differently in the next rollout? Maybe, the 2.0, right? Software augmentation, testings, regimes, or any other rollout. Is there any learnings you can draw and take away and share?
I think I mentioned before that Siemens is a very diverse company. We do have many subsidiaries, as mentioned, very international in the meantime, and that's, I think, is very, very much known. But we've seen that as a big learning to include as early as possible all those different regulations, all those local regulations, to make sure that afterwards, when you're scaling, you don't have the showstoppers there on a country basis. So we did a lot of learning there. For example, China is a very popular example that has very strict regulations and cybersecurity and so on. India as well, and other countries. And that's why we have a lot of learning there. And also on the building level, and that's also one that we learned a lot of insights there, how to build those costs back to the departments on an automated basis, which hasn't been happened so far on a per user basis.
So the time was always very critical. So first we had 2,000 users, then by end of April the information came that the user base will raise by 18,000 users to 20,000 users. But yeah, like the back end was not super prepared for it. And I think it was up to the team there to manage those issues. If you would have had more time to set up that organization, it is more stable in the long run. And so currently we are trying there to get that fundament ready and to like clean up what we have already done, to set it up more stable. But honestly saying with the time pressure, we also did a lot of things right, and where we also are in contact with the PO department to share those insights to make it available for different Gen AI projects.
Super cool, but I wonder, on a personal level, a lot of fears that one have in utilizing generative AI is about the notion of hallucination. That means coming up with results that looks cool and relevant and maybe precise, but which aren't, because they're made up. Maybe the expression not even exist, the variable may not exist. What kind of best practices would you have in terms of mitigating, these spurious results of Gen AI models, which maybe exist also in GitHub, right?
Yeah, that's a good point. Also from my own experience in the IDEs and in the target environment, basically the combination of tools. So GitHub Copilot is just one cornerstone in your tooling, and also one that can integrate other tools as well. So for example, if I do Python development on a daily basis, I integrate results from my Python tooling back into the Copilot to enhance the results. For example, as you mentioned, to say, okay, this variable didn't show up in your code, it's probably wrong. And then it would be in the result would be a hint to say, okay, this one looks like a typo, please check it again. So this sort of the circle of tools is there to include all your insights into one, which is one big benefit of the Copilot compared to other tools, which we don't really have this interaction with the tooling in your IDE.
So diversifying the tools and maybe also adding a little bit of expertise is the secret sauce.
Definitely, yeah.
From the rule set which we have, like everybody who's using the GitHub Copilot needs to understand that it's a Copilot. It's not the pilot. So the responsibility still stays with the developers, and that's very crucial. So the developer in the end is responsible, and he needs to know that he's responsible. And if he doesn't understand the suggestion, he cannot use it. So currently it's also like on that process level where we're trying to capture it. And that's why we have seen a bigger productivity increase with the seniors, because they are faster in doing that.
Yeah, that's like going back again to the users, and now you mentioned the senior developers as well. And I'm wondering how the introduction of this new tool really changed the daily grind for the software developers. And do you also perceive maybe a change in the culture? Like, do they work differently? Do they talk differently? Are they, more enthusiastic about their work? Did the coding process itself completely change? Maybe you can give us a glimpse into what's the new normal.
Yeah, definitely there's a change. I think it's a big change in the industry overall. You see that before, mostly the senior developers with the most experience, they had their code base, be it C or Java or something else, some legacy code base for the last almost 2 decades worked on, and more or less a tunnel vision at some point to say, I have my knowledge, my insight, my tooling, and I don't really have to change anything. It works for me, that's my process, that's it. But software develops, it evolves over time, so it's some input from the outside to say, okay, maybe some change might be good to really save some time, some resource in the next release. That sort of inputs we've heard from developers, from the users, that they have some innovation, some inspiration is there and helps them to evolve their products. So that was one big thing that we heard from the users. Those insights, and of course just the overall certification, the how satisfied they are with their work has improved as well from our response to what we heard.
So if you're looking a bit more in the future direction, are there any, the field of AI is fascinating, right? We're curious to maybe to learn and hear from you as well. What Are there specific innovations, expectations, or cool things you love in AI? Is there a specific application, maybe in software space or a software development space or other, right? What is for you a pretty cool, hot ambition level where AI should be, tangled or being pushed for?
One interesting thing, like very recently, the CEO from Microsoft, I saw a talk with him, and he mentioned like that he in the future probably doesn't really see the need of software developer, because the AI can access directly to the database and changes the data as you want. And then at the same time, the CEO of GitHub, he has spreading his ideas that he's targeting 1 billion software developers. So within one company, they're not really aligned. But definitely all those reasoning models which we see, can they be improved to use less energy, for example? So currently it's O1, we see some benchmarks from O3. Where is the future? I think that is very interesting.
Yeah, I mean, we mentioned a few trends before. Fine-tuning is one big one. Also the retrieval of documents, so work, retrieval augmented generation. So you have your documents, your documentation, your inputs from all over the place that are then fetched and included into your prompts, is one big trend that has been more and more growing over the year. And I think in general, as I mentioned, the context, so the inclusion of more and more, say, hardware insights maybe, or bigger environments would be one big trend that we see in the future, to basically move from just your software to, let's say, for example, infrastructure as code, to say, okay, I want to increase my whole workflow and create the infrastructure as well using the same workflows.
Cool.
So very exciting times ahead, and we will follow you closely, guys, and maybe also record a second follow-up episode once we're larger in scale and maybe even more precise. So before we wrap things up, maybe do you have some advice for the people out there listening in right now? I guess at Siemens, but also beyond the Siemens boundaries, people are introducing new tools and coming up with innovation. How do you really drive that? Is there something that you took away from your journey that you would like to share with the audience out there?
Of course. I mean, as I mentioned before, it has big benefits. So do check those tools out. I mean, we see them being more and more important for your daily tasks. So make sure to have some experience, some tests. I think that would be one big advice from my side.
So from one of the podium discussions one advice was, or one hint was, it will not be the artificial intelligence which will take your job very soon. It will be another developer which is using artificial intelligence, which is taking your job. And even though there is currently fear, I think it's unavoidable, and we should be open to that change. And if we can improve our output with the help of AI, then it helps Siemens and it helps us all.
All right, that's good advice for sure. And one last thing before we jump to the final game. So I feel that you have so much passion for this GitHub Copilot, and this was like, you walked such a long journey, and there were so many hurdles with the legal people like jumping in your way, and like so many considerations, so many people to take along. What is it that maybe that one thing that makes you so passionate about the GitHub Copilot?
I think it's currently, you can define the future a little bit, or you can heading the direction, and this is like so motivating. And like when you work on a different project with PLM or something, then you use Google, and it's very hard to get any information. But that topic is really currently in the focus. You find so many information, and there is. Yeah, you have basically the chance to get so much information, and also define it within Siemens. Maybe partly that's for me very interesting, giving you the creational freedom.
Yeah, as Thomas mentioned, it's a big chance to basically participate, to contribute to this future of the company, to drive software development at Siemens, to say, how does our future look like as at Siemens? We do focus more and more on software than on hardware as in the past, so I think it's just a big chance to be part of this movement.
That's beautiful.
True. And there are not many cases where, it's leapfrogging the software company Siemens, which we want to be. And the second, at scale, double-digit impact on, on productivity is not in many cases, so much tangible, so much geeky, so much value actually also, with a positive feedback from each individual. And that's, I think it's a good, showcase and lighthouse, I think, initiative, for Siemens to stand out how the usage of Gen AI as a positive tool for ourselves.
So, Thomas and Adrian, thank you so much for taking the time, for coming over, taking the long way with the unstable trains here in Germany to come to the AI Lab. And we've reached the very end of the session. But before we'll let you go, we want to play our signature game called Authentic Autocomplete. Also a little bit of a copilot, right? And trust me, it will be lots of fun. But this time I'll give you the sentence starters and you'll bring them home with your finishes. So ready to give it a go?
Yeah, that's good.
Okay, Adrian, why don't we start with you? Siemens is
an innovative company that has lots of history, but it's constantly evolving and big future.
Hopefully, yeah, big future. See that, Siemens colleagues? Big future ahead.
And Thomas, AI is
a great opportunity, and I think it's not possible to be stopped anymore, no matter what you think about it.
Unstoppable.
Here you go.
Adrian, Software 2.0 is
definitely based on tooling using AI. We see this in about all our vendors and our partners in the industry. So that's one big thing from my side, yeah.
And Thomas, humans and AI are a match made in heaven because
humans are sometimes lazy.
Yeah, for sure. And Uli, why don't you take the last one?
Adrian, if I could invent one rule for everyone in the world to follow, it would be?
To be more communicative, to be more innovative, to enhance your interactions with your teams. That would be a big thing for all of us, I guess. Yeah.
So let's all comply to Adrian's new rule in the world. Here we go. Thanks so much, Adrian and Thomas, for being open and minded and sharing a bit of the journey of what it means, unleashing generative AI technology in Siemens and the tool stack. So thanks so much for taking the time and sharing this.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Thanks for the invitation.
And folks out there, stay bold, committed, and open-minded. Connect with Thomas and Adrian on LinkedIn, or comment under this post, right? What do you like? What do you don't like? What we should improve, right? Obviously, we want to be every episode even better, and most importantly, stay bold, committed, and open-minded. And we hear us at the next Siemens AI Lab podcast. Cheers.